I had something pretty interesting happen to me just this past week. I am in a rotation with several other individuals who teach the fourth and fifth grade kind of Sunday school class, I guess you could say, at our church. And so I only do it once a month, and so it's just they've been going through the Bible, and at this point was Numbers chapter 20, and it was focusing on the instance where Moses was commanded to speak to a rock and have water come out of it in order to provide water for the people of Israel as they wandered in the desert. And that in this story, he doesn't do that. Instead, he strikes the rock and the water comes out. And this act of incomplete obedience results in Moses being forbidden from entering the promised land with the remnant of Israel. And it's a fascinating story. It's something that theologians have puzzled over for a long time of like, it seems minor, right? Not a big deal. But as I was reading through it, for context, I have been reading through the Bible. I've probably gone through like 7 or 8 times at this point, through beginning cover to cover, and that I've been reading the Bible, studying the Bible for probably 25 years, and I have been teaching the Bible for going on probably 15 total years. So I've been through this story, I've taught it multiple times up to this point already. But I had never seen before that Moses struck the rock 2 times. It says this in every translation, that he strikes the rock twice. And I don't know why I'd missed that subtle detail, but that's interesting to me, that after all these times of studying the Bible, teaching the Bible, I'd never noticed that before. That in itself is pretty interesting. But it also kind of enlivened where I was studying the story a lot more closely, first because I knew that I was going to be teaching it, so I was reviewing it much more closely this time, I guess. And then also the fact that seeing that minor detail that for some reason I'd glanced over made me pay even more fine detail attention to the rest of the story. And so it looks like this. The people of Israel have been wandering in the desert for what you might say is 7 chapters. If you didn't know, in Numbers chapter 12 and 13 is where they are up against the borders of the Promised Land the first time. And they have a chance to go in, send the 12 spies, they scout out the land. And they return with a positive report that says that this place truly is exactly what it's been billed as. But there's giants in the land. And that we are as a grasshopper in their eyes, is what they literally say. And 10 of these spies, their heart turns and they say that we can't do this. It's not possible. And Joshua and Caleb famously say, no, we are well able to go in and take the land God has given us. The people of Israel, their hearts melt, they listen to the majority, and they refuse to go in. God then says, all right, fine, if you don't want to go in, you will never go in. He gives them what they want. And so for 40 years now, they are going to have to struggle wandering in the desert until they die. And then only the remnant of Joshua and Caleb, and at that time, Moses and Aaron are going to be allowed to go in. Well, throughout their wandering, literally, they come into, in Numbers chapter 20, it says that they had come in to this area, there's no water. And they come to, it says they quarrel with, they fight with Aaron and Moses, saying, why did you bring us to this place, that we should die in the desert? To which I would respond, you brought yourselves to this place to die. It's what you deserve. And that if I'm Moses, this is where I kind of self-insert, if I'm Moses of like, yeah, we're here at this place where there's no water because God told you you're going to die in the desert, and that God is being faithful to the next generation, that they're not going to have to wait as long as they thought. it's going to happen much more quickly. But instead, he goes to before the Lord. They bow down the way they're supposed to, and God speaks to them and says, "Take your staff, and that you are to assemble the people." Number 2, and number 3, you are to speak to a rock and have water come forth. And they almost obey to the letter. It says that they took the staff as according to the way God had commanded, and that they assemble the people the way God had commanded. But then Moses speaks to the people instead. Rather than speaking to the rock, rather than doing what has been explicitly commanded, he speaks to them instead. And instead of speaking to the solution that God has prescribed, he speaks to the problem that they have encountered. And I think there's a lot to have gained from that, that we have the tendency to do the same thing. We speak to our problems rather than speaking to our solutions. You get any group of people together, politically or in a church or anywhere, and what do? Their natural inclination is to begin complaining about things that they're dissatisfied with, especially those things that they can't control, the behavior of their supervisors or whatever. This is the way humanity is. We speak to our problems without even thinking about pursuing a solution. And then as we do that, we then take it into our own hands, right? We then try on our own to solve our problems, which is exactly what Moses did. He speaks to the problem, which is the people, and then he strikes the rock. And in my mind, this is what happens, is that he strikes it the one time and it doesn't work. And then he strikes it the second time and then God brings the water out. That's kind of how I imagine it went, because he does it twice. That 2 times is in there. That's a fine detail that they didn't need to include. He could have just said struck the rock and that would have been fine. That's really interesting to me. But what's a second really, really interesting thing is that God could have left the people in their thirst due to the disobedience of their leaders. But he did not do that. He brought the water out of the rock anyways. He still was faithful to his commitment to provide for them, even in the wake of unfaithfulness on behalf of the leadership. That's really valuable.